Welcome to the Festival of Entrepreneurs, recorded live at the NEC in Birmingham. Over the next few minutes, you'll hear from some of the most incredible founders, investors, and business leaders who joined us this year.
Thank you for joining us. This session is all about grants, business grants, how to get them, where you can get them. I'm sure there isn't a founder out there that wouldn't love to receive a business grant. So hopefully these guys can help you in your journey to getting the business grant. Right, so let's start with, on the end, we have the founder of Mango Honey, Johan Huber. In the middle, we have John Clark. He's the CEO of Capital Innovation Fund. And next to me is co-founder and COO of Swoop Funding, Kieran Burke. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Street. Thank you.
Welcome. Right, Johan, start with you. Start with a really easy one, and we'll start from the top. Where do founders actually start their search for grants? How do they start that process?
Well, I would say, first of all, you need to find out, where are you based and what you want to go for. Because if you're a UK business, you're a small business, I would say the best route is probably Innovate UK as the main grant giving body for the UK. If you're based in Europe or you have stronger ties to Europe, you can also look at the EIC in terms of grants. But I would maybe, take a step back and look at just not only grants but non-dilutive funding as a sort of bigger picture. Basically, where can you get money in as a founder that doesn't dilute you and your ownership on the cap table? In Innovate UK, there's a good thing at the moment, which is innovation loans. We will get to talk about those later a little bit as well. But I would say Innovate UK if you're UK sort of SME, and the EIC if you have strong ties to the EU.
Okay. John, anywhere else you would start your search for a grant?
No, not really. I don't think so. In all fairness, probably worth pointing out when you look for funding at the early stages that the grant should form part of the wider strategy of your whole funding journey. But rightly so, Europe is the European Innovation Council, the EIC funding, and here in the UK many years ago they brought it all under one umbrella, which is Innovate UK. So yes, good start.
Cool, thank you. Now, Kieran, Swoop have received grants in the past. Do you want to quickly touch on that process, how you went about that, what was involved, and maybe some tips for the audience on how they could maybe go about their own grant journey?
Yeah, funnily enough, where we've had success with grants hasn't necessarily been in the traditional routes, such as EU-based funding or Innovate UK-based funding. And what I'm going to go into is often serendipitous in terms of the timing of when these are available. But I would also say it is worthwhile, and I appreciate it can be hard to keep tabs on, when looking at what the private sector is in terms of competitions and funding. Some of the more obvious ones that are on an ongoing basis are kind of some of the big technology business or companies. So your Microsoft, your Google, your Amazon. So if you're a technology business and you're going to have high hosting costs, then all of those companies offer a lot of free credits for technology businesses to be able to use their services. So for instance, at Swoop you would have got maybe around $250,000 worth of free credit from Microsoft. But where we really did well, grants or non-dilutive funding, was from an industry competition, or a couple of industry competitions. The first one was, there's an innovation agency called Nesta. So again, they are looking for kind of thematics, and at the time open banking was becoming a theme within the UK. We wanted to use open banking as a technology within Swoop. So we saw that Nesta had a competition where they partner with the UK regulator, the Competition and Market Authority, and the 9 largest banks by retail footprint, where they were giving prizes of 100,000 for businesses that would put forward ideas around open banking. So we put forward an idea which they liked in terms of how we could compare business banking, and we got the initial 100,000, and then that 100,000 was used to build out a proof of concept, or we were able to put it into the market and see how customers performed with it. And we were then able to pitch that, show that in action, and they gave us a further 250,000 to then take it to the next kind of level of commercial standing, as well as mandating the 9 largest banks in the UK to work with us. So it was an incredible springboard for us, not just to receive the funding, but actually to work with industry specific. NatWest Bank had to put in about $500 million of interventions to the market because they didn't break up their bank during the financial crisis. So as such, there was lots of interventions for big banks to get some more market share. But they had a sliver for SMEs again to make banking more competitive. But just being aware of those private funds allowed us to apply. And the first one we got 5 million and the second was 2.5. So I think it's really important to also look at what's happening in the private landscape, which will be relevant to whatever sector or industry that you happen to be working with.
Yeah, really interesting. And you touched on there something about tech businesses, which triggered something, or a question that I wanted to ask you guys is, what are some misconceptions around grant funding? I think a lot of people think that grants are maybe only available to tech businesses, or maybe it's free funding. What are some misconceptions you see founders coming to you with that are just incorrect? Yeah.
Well, I would say there is a grant, there's a scope of the grant, and the question is not whether there's only grants for tech businesses. It's like what are you doing, and do you match with the scope? That's the most important thing, right? Are you eligible to apply for? If you're not eligible, don't bother, right? You shouldn't bend over backwards to get the grant. I think that's the most important thing. And apart from that, there's grants for all sorts of businesses, all sorts of industries. Really, it's more in the finding the nugget rather than just thinking grants are only for tech businesses and don't apply. I think do your homework when you go for the research. What's the grant? What's the eligibility? What's the scope? In your line with the scope, and then really that makes a good application, right? It makes writing the application easier, getting the money, managing the application at the end. It all starts at the beginning there, and it's probably the biggest misconception.
John, anything to add around misconceptions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, grants, the grant landscape could be an absolute total minefield, in all fairness. If we look at an EIC accelerated grant, for instance, European funding, the guidelines are 83 pages.
Wow.
And that puts people straight off. I mean, you just close a laptop and you think, well, it's going to take a lot of time to do it. I don't have the time, don't have the money, and I probably won't get the funding. So that's what puts people off, really, in all fairness, which is where you obviously reach out to professionals. So yeah, it is a total minefield. But one thing that you have to be sure is that you meet the criteria of the application. I've seen so many people making applications for grants, not really reading that criteria, and then it doesn't even get through the assessment stage, which is heartbreaking, because you put hours and hours and hours of effort into making an application, and it doesn't even make assessments. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know for the EIC, right, but for innovation loans in the UK, the number of ineligible applications is about 30%, 30. So let's assume there is 200 applications, meaning 60 companies went through the entire month-long process of preparing those applications, and they don't even get assessed. They get picked out before because they picked the wrong amount, are not eligible in the first place, wrong industry. You've wasted all the time, and then you get to the assessment stage and you're not even get looked at because you get picked out, right? That's heartbreaking.
Absolutely, and that's where our phones ring generally, because people have spent a lot of time and effort to make an application, and then let's say in the finances of a loan, you're allowed 30% maximum subcontractors, and they've gone to 31%. It will just get binged on that basis. It won't even go through assessment. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, I mean, Johan, you touched on innovation loans, and we could spend the whole session talking about Innovate UK if we wanted to, but maybe for those in the room who aren't familiar with innovation loans, do you want to just quickly run through what those are?
Yeah, so I would say at the moment in the UK it's probably one of the best schemes if you're willing to take on a loan, but it's not a grant that you have to not repay, right? It's a loan that you have to repay. It comes in a cost, so there's interest associated with it, but they're quite sizable. So it's up to 5 million in loan that you can get for those. and your business should align with one of three areas. So it's green tech and health, and then sort of future technology, AI and things like that. So if your business can align with one of those three, you are actually eligible to go for one of those loans. And the repayment can be delayed for up to 5 years. So really you get the money in and build your business with them. During that 5-year period, you only pay 3.7% in interest, and then once the repayment starts, another 3.7 gets added to it, and then you repay the loan. But it's a very, very attractive way of funding a business, especially if you're the founder and you save yourself the dilution from not having to raise 5 million from a VC, right? So in the end, when you sell the business, you're laughing because you paid 3.7% interest rather than paying a VC 20% equity.
Totally, yeah. John, I was going to ask you, I mean, Innovate UK has gone through a lot of changes this year. The landscape's very different to maybe what it was 12 or 18 months ago. How do you see Innovate UK and the general grants landscape in the UK specifically looking over the next 12 to 18 months?
Sure. I just want to pick up on one point here, which is quite important with any grant, which is that a grant offer gives so much credence to your potential business that you can exploit the results of that. If you're very clever, you can massively exploit that position. I just want to make that point.
That's a good point.
So Innovate UK, they're going through a little bit of a transition phase, I would say, right now. This time last year, they had 18 grants available on their portal. I looked yesterday, there's still 18. But if we look 2 years ago, there was actually 40 grants available. You guys can draw your own conclusions from that, I'm sure. But there's lots of talk about the Smart Grant, which was what they call an open call grant, and you could make an application from lots of different areas or sectors. Will that come back? I don't think it will. Personally, I don't think that they'll bring back an open call grant, but what I think they will probably concentrate on is more themed applications. So what we might see is applications for biotech, for the hydrogen, AI, etc., etc. That all generally will align with the what they call the UKRI Challenge Fund. Used to be called the Grand Challenge Areas. So I think they're sharpening their pencil right now in Innovate UK. Something probably exciting will happen. They're not being very vocal about that, so we don't know, and this is all assumptions. But when it does come back, it could be quite exciting.
Interesting. And Ira, obviously as co-founder of Swoop, you've received grants, taken on VC money, taken on debt. What's your take on that? Smart grants aren't going to come back in the same way they did. Are you seeing at Swoop more businesses coming looking for debt in lieu of smart grants not being there? And maybe like are people aware of innovation loans? Do people come looking for those? Like, how do you manage that gap in the market, in the grants market? Do you fill it just with loans?
Yeah, I think the Innovate-based smart grants were a really interesting grant because they were so open-ended and there wasn't like a specific theme or sector associated with them. What they did manage to do to create market was a broader awareness that grants existed, so therefore help raise the profile of grants as a possible avenue. Now there were some challenges with that, but because they're so broad and open-ended, again, people maybe not reading the eligibility petitions, you had a huge volume of people applying and not necessarily succeeding with it. But what it did do was definitely spark people an awareness point of view, which is no bad thing. People should always, what we say, be aware of all options that are eligible for you. But I think the frustrating thing, for businesses, particularly in the UK, is where those smart grants were, there's not a natural basis for them at the moment, and people also got used to how consistent they were. So it was nearly every quarter you were seeing those polls open up. So definitely drove awareness, and there kind of just feels like we're in this purgatory movement. So it will be good to kind of get some direction. I think one thing that I have seen is kind of interesting, and I think maybe the guys here are probably best to speak into it, is, well, what can't UK businesses do that they haven't been able to do in a recent amount of time? Because from leaving the EU and because of Brexit, it kind of removed a lot of EU funding where a lot of businesses were looking at before. But what the government has done is rejoined some element of that EIC funding. So what we are kind of trying to see is, at a student perspective, is we want to help make people aware of that, where they are eligible, how they can get involved. And I think it will be really good to hear from the guys, because they're seeing it at an application level, and they could probably speak a lot better about eligibility piece. But what we want to do is to sweep for those people that are now more aware of grants, thanks to the smart grants. We want to be able to direct them to other things that are more readily available.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I wanted to double click on the EIC grants. John, Johan, John, do you want to maybe explain what those are? How do you go about them as a UK business? Getting one, can you get one as a UK business? Do you want to start from the top and explain EIC for those who aren't aware what that is?
Sure. My favourite subject. So EIC is direct European funding from the European Innovation Council. It's a very clever programme, would you agree? Because it doesn't matter where you are on your journey in terms of, they call it technology readiness level, but really it doesn't matter where you are in terms of your journey. You can make an application. So you can make an application right at the start, which is what they call the EIC Pathfinder. You can then transition into EIC transition, and then your acceleration to market is through the EIC accelerator. UK businesses, we did buy our way back into Project Horizon some years ago. We left that during Brexit. Didn't want to use the Brexit word. UK businesses are eligible for grant-only route funding, which is a maximum of 2.5 million euros. It is match funded, but we'll just say 2.5 million euros. If you're based in the EU, in one of the 27 member states, you can access what they call blended funding, which is the 2.5 million grant and then 7.5 million worth of equity as well. So yes, it's a nice funding route, and there's lots of money available as well.
Johan, are you seeing companies come to you looking for EIC grants?
EIC grants and also other EU funding. So we shouldn't forget that funding from EIC is not only accelerator or pathfinder. There's many other grants similar to the UK. Again, eligibility is really the question. Oftentimes they come with a collaboration requirement, so that, for example, a UK company has to collaborate with another member state, with another company in a EU member state, and so that's also quite important. But similar to some pathways in the UK, it can be really specific, right? So it can be related to fisheries in coast areas, and then you obviously need to somehow figure out your way into there. But I would say, as with equity or as with debt, you just need to do a good research and then build out your portfolio, what to go for, and be quite strategic about it.
Okay, cool, thank you. Kieran, I'll come to you because John touched on match funding. I wanted to get you to explain to those who might not be aware of it, explain what it is, what type of funds are considered match, and how do you go about getting match funding?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's the rabbit's fault or sometimes the business's inability to read, but it's amazing how many times business kind of may get awarded a grant but not realise that there are conditions to that grant, namely I need managed funding to be able to fully utilise and draw down against it. And the other thing that maybe is painted as clearly to them is grants agencies don't have different ways of distributing that grant. Again, touching on what I was speaking earlier, we were quite fortuitous with the kind of private grants. We were getting it all in one go, which is quite rare. Whereas with a lot of these grants, they're project based and they come in different cycles. So you really need to think about how are you going to be able to operate as a business as those grants are drawn down, and that's where match funding plays a huge role. So that's where you kind of need to think about the other funding rates as a business owner, so that can be on the lending side and also on the equity side. Now, John touched on technology readiness stat, which is something that is a barometer to where you are as a business from are you live, are you creating, are you researching, are you market ready, are you in market? And naturally speaking, a lot of grants are in an earlier embryonic stage of like, get out there, innovate, think differently, come up with some new technology, test it out. But what that also means is you've no money and you've no revenue. So therefore, debt is a very hard thing to match fund against it. Now, that being said, there are specific funders out there that are familiar with Innovate, they are familiar with the EIC, and they will debt fund against those grants. But traditionally speaking, it is hard to use traditional debt products unless they're specifically grant-orientated debt products. So you really need to find those debt products that are associated with grants. Therefore, things like equity is probably a more natural fit for those very early onset phases. So particularly those businesses that are spinning out of universities in life sciences, going through clinical trials, it's really important to use the fund that you've come up through to kind of match against those grant funding opportunities. But it is a real thing that you'd be surprised. You think everyone will be aware that match funding is a normal thing, but a lot of business owners don't realize until they want the grant.
Yeah, just to add one thing which I find quite interesting, you can use R&D tax credits as match funding. Many people forget that, right? So you can do that, and you may also be eligible for R&D tax credits on your grant.
Yes.
Right? So if you combine those and you do very careful liquidity planning, you can actually mitigate a large part of that. That's
brilliant.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, good, very good point.
Sorry, also I was going to say, it's much easier to find a source of match funding with your offer letter in your hand than it is without a grant offer, so don't tend to sweat the small stuff.
Now, when it comes to the application process, obviously lots of people will use a grant writer. What sort of costs are they looking for or looking at? And what is still the responsibility of the founder to provide when it comes to that grant application?
I would say, first of all, you need to understand sort of for grant writing, there's obviously a spectrum, right? So you can get the full service package, which is kind of like what I do. So I have some companies that come to me literally with a written paragraph, and that's it. And they say, go away, do a grant. And because I know them and I know that what they do is exceptional, I may do a project like this. So that's at the one end of the spectrum, likely rather expensive, but obviously the founder doesn't have to do much except for a final review and a sign-off, right? On the other end of the spectrum, you have more, I would say, almost automated services, which are more about educating you how to write a grant, and then you write it yourself, right? And you find everything else on that spectrum. So in terms of costs, it really depends on what's the volume of the grant that you're looking for, right? So you probably wouldn't work with someone like me unless the grant is north of, I would say, £500,000 or higher, right? And for a project like this, you pay anywhere from £5,000 to £10,000 up front. And then there's usually a success fee which ranges from 5 to 10%. I mean, I'm sort of giving you averages there. And if you look at the other end of the spectrum where you're doing the writing yourself, maybe much, much lower in terms of upfront fee and fixed fees, but that's sort of what you're budgeting in. And all keeping in mind that if you do it yourself, you may be wasting sort of 3 or 4 months of your time. You may not get the result that you desire, right? And then you just are where you started, not the wiser.
John, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Sadly, people often come to us out of pure desperation. and they think, well, I've got this good idea, I want to get it off the ground, and I need some money tomorrow, and that never really worked out well for them. As I said at the start, applying for a grant should form a part of your larger funding strategy, because if we made an application today, we'd be lucky to see any money by, let's say, I don't know, it depends who you make the application with, maybe March, April, May next year. So it can take a long time. So if you are desperate for the money, maybe the grant route is not for you.
That's a very good segue into my next question, which is for you, Kieran. How long should a founder expect the whole process to take? Obviously, every grant's going to be very different, but what sort of time frame are we talking, and how do you manage cash flow in the interim until a grant potentially lands?
Yeah,
or grant funding potentially lands?
I think the guys touched on such an important point, which is the time movement.
Yeah.
When I think about when we did our grants, it was in 2018 and 2019,
right,
and we got another one in 2021, and that was our first. We launched in 2018, so within our first 3 years, and so when it was the least busy we were with regards to kind of live being in market, having customers. The idea of of trying to even get the time that we have back in there to write, as I don't even know how we would do that now. But the thing that I think we definitely factored in when we were looking at the grants that we were particularly looking at was the kind of key milestone times, which was when does the thing have to be in by, when are the judging periods, and when is the project due to be released. So that could factor in, to John's point, how does that work in their overall cash flow scenario. In none of the scenarios was it this is our sole way of fundraising. This was not going to be the be and all and end of our businesses continuing. So I think that was so important. But if I'm thinking about it now, just not have any bandwidth like we would have had the time to put in to do the writing, and we also were so fastidious with the eligibility criteria back then, and it was only that on the 10th or 12th time of reading it that you realise, oh my goodness, we've really not talked about that or didn't, and we just wouldn't have the bandwidth to do that now. So I think, not that we wouldn't ever want to put grants into our wider funding strategy, we would definitely need that support to be able to really sense check eligibility and think about it from a timing perspective, because we were just had so much more time to afford to it back then than we would now.
Okay, cool. Conscious of time, we've only got 5 or so minutes left. So before, if any of you have any questions, I'll come to that in a second. Before we do that, I wanted to get one final tip from all of you to increase. Let's assume everyone's going to apply for a grant in the next 12 months. What's one tip you would give them to increase their chances of success?
I think I even have 2 tips. So first tip is winning a grant is really like winning a tennis match, and you win a tennis match by not losing. It sounds stupid, but what that means is, and it doesn't help if you're just good in one area, right? You need to tick all the boxes, review all the questions, and answer all the questions, because assessors, they will mark you down if you don't answer one question. They don't mark you up if you're excellent in another question. So that's tip number 1. And the other, it's more like a mental image, really. You in a grant competition, oftentimes it's not only one company that wins, it's several companies that win. And it's really like when you're running from a bear, it doesn't pay to be the first one. You shouldn't be the last one, right? So if you keep that in mind, you need to be excellent in your application. Just answer all the questions, but don't overdo it just in one area. I would say that's quite a common mistake that I see.
Yeah, it is common, and I've seen lots of applications where they've used 75% of the word count on one question because they look at the questions and think that's the most important. I need to spend a lot of time on it, and it really isn't. But my tip is read the criteria, and then put your laptop down, go away, and the next day read the criteria. And honestly, read the criteria 10 times over a week. Build yourself a framework, copy the questions out, put them into a framework, put your answers next to it, so that you are 100% sure that you've covered all the areas that are required. That's my number one tip.
Sounds simple, doesn't it? But it's so crucial.
It's exactly what we did about 10 or 12 times.
Yeah.
Those eligibility criteria, and it is kind of piggybacking on that answer, but it's slightly reframing it. There's a reason they're putting that grant there. They want something done. They want something changed. They want something. If they want an impact, you get too hubristic or self-obsessed about your own business, your own direction, and it isn't pinned aligned, which is very hard to do, to what they're looking to do from an impact point of view. And it's very hard to get the grant. So really put yourself in their shoes. What is the impact that they want you to do, and anchor everything through that.
Very smart. Okay, we've got 4 minutes. I wonder, does anybody have a question for the guys whilst we've got them? Any questions, anybody? Yeah? I'll come down 1 sec.
So, I don't know much about grant applications, so you'll excuse if questions. Now, as a startup founder, well, the elephant in the room is money, and to look for money is literally a full-time job. That said, you can either find a job to work to support yourself, it's about time, but then your fundraising is going to be shown is going to take longer, and the longer you're on the market, the more your thing is like something is wrong inside. So, is there grant funding to help you? So, it sounds kind of strange to say that, but to help you survive while you're in that process of raising funds, or even for your MVP, if you want to go to market, test the product during that period.
The only thing I make the guys could know something different to me, so this is just what popped into my head. I have seen certain accelerator formats. So there's one called Adver, there's another one called Entrepreneur First, where they try and bring exceptional founders together. They might be merging a technical founder with a marketeer, or a financier with a scientist. And they're investing, as the accelerator program, they're investing in exceptional talent. What they're hoping is they'll fuse together into a brilliant idea that then becomes investable. But what they do during that period of maybe 12 weeks is they'll give them a stipend or a sub money, so that they can kind of come together and work through that. And so there may be other ones that I don't know that are similar to that. That's what popped into my head. Now I'm sure highly competitive to get onto, but that's kind of just what popped into my head.
Yeah, I think NatWest used to do one similar. I don't know whether they still do that. I don't think they do since the pandemic.
They could well.
But in terms of grants, is there anything available to support you on your journey? Not really. I mean, if it was me, I'd probably look to maybe crowdfund, and you have to sacrifice some equity maybe, but it might get you somewhere where you can pack in your full-time job and concentrate on your passion.
I think, in fact, there was, up until April this year, it was called Feasibility Studies in AI, Innovate UK grant, 25 to 50,000 pounds, funded at 100%. I'm not sure they're going to release it again, but I would say it definitely pays to double check, because it may be one of those areas. And it was quite stringently defined, because it was only for companies that have not received any Innovate UK funding before. It was quite specific to the technology area as well. But I mean, it's a good chunk to get started, right? So 25 or 50, especially if you don't have a match funding required. It was quite good. That's what I would look. So general Innovate UK grants overview, scan it every month or so, and just check whether it pops up again.
Okay, well, Kira, John, Gohan, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge, and thank you everyone for sticking around so late in the day. I hope you found it worthwhile. Thanks everyone.
Thanks for watching this special episode from the Festival of Entrepreneurs. Our mission is simple: to help founders and business owners grow faster, think bigger, and take action. And if you were part of the event, thank you for joining us and being part of the community. And if you missed it, don't worry. We'll be back with even more ideas, inspiration, and opportunities to help you take your business to the next level. You can find out more and register for future events at festivalofentrepreneurs.co.uk.